what we're talking about. We're talking about a deal provided by Western investment funds that expect to get at least an interest in exchange for the writing off of a debt on Ukrainian bonds worth, mind you, 20 billion USD. Imagine the scale of deception of Western audience, initially using taxes, using payments and political toolkit. Ukraine was funded and they promised that Ukraine will pay this off, and turns out that it will not pay this off, namely 20 billion USD. The creditors include BlackRock and PIMCO. If the deal is not concluded, then in August, when there will be an end of delay for servicing the state debt, Ukraine can go bankrupt. The Wall Street Journal also states that Kiev might spend means that are allocated as kind of an assistance to it. We're talking about global shenanigans, not of global scale, but of a historical global scale. Probably the universe cannot recall anything of this kind.
So Ukraine, I mean, of course, the Kiev regime, the structure on Bankova. It's just a colossal global laundering structure for tens of and hundreds of billions of dollars that whose purpose is not actually known and whose destination is unknown. So it's a concern for the so-called business sharks. The Ukrainian economy is doing so badly that it is doomed to fall into a deep coma without Western support, without external support. And they have already spent all the available funds for assistance to the so-called Ukrainian democracy. The European Commission's foreign policy spokesman on the 6th of May made a statement about Ukraine's alleged right to attack the Crimean Bridge. It was underlined self-defense. It should be called only direct coercion to terrorism. And it's about a statement, not of some representative of some marginal political party or extremist movement. It's about a European official who is talking from the entire European Union in general, who is doing his job. And the European Union is not just a sponsor of the Kiev regime, but instigating by its statement, instigating Kiev to attack peaceful Russian cities, civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, shops. Together with the shipments of heavy weapons and long-range weapons, the EU officials ignore their own international commitments by facilitating the actions of Ukrainian neo-Nazis. Josep Borrell, the head of European diplomacy, explicitly recognized that the Ukrainian conflict has a quick, peaceful solution. And personally, himself and the European Union, represented by him, really do not want the cessation of hostilities. And citing Borrell and other European officials, we have noted the long-term investments by the European Union financing arms supplies to Ukraine in order to prolong the armed conflict. And that's another confirmation of the terrible reality. Ordinary Ukrainians are just a tool that Zelensky sold to the EU. And they are being used to settle geopolitical scores between the West and our country regarding forced mobilization. Just not possible to mention another horror of the Ukrainian draft. They are ready to slaughter anyone, sick or healthy. It's not important for them. For Ukrainian criminals, they just need to prolong this agony, this dance with death, in order somewhere to profit, somewhere to prolong their own fate. They cannot be avoided. Somewhere to cover the corruption schemes, also taking into account the coming election in the United States of America and the corruption of the Biden family that is tied to Kiev. We do not doubt that the EU does not care about the fate of Russians or Ukrainians or anyone else. Just barren statements that they live in a beautiful garden and the rest are wild jungle. It's just a proof of anything. It's just parasitization of the West on the resources of other countries. The superiority of the golden billion over the peoples of the global South and East. The globalist and neo-colonialist thinking of the European Union in developing its foreign policy and domestic policy as well. All the mentioned facts are just other contours underlining the relevance of the special military operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine and eliminate the threats emanating from its territory. As stated by the Russian officials, they will all be fulfilled. We have many questions on the so-called Meritorious Peacemaker website. I would remind it's an extremist internet resource. I would like to remind that we have many times drawn attention of human rights structures, international structures, on the publications on the American service and the internet resource where the data of public figures, journalists, and now even children is published. Why is it published? It's just a plan to destroy the mentioned people. When a certain journalist, publicist, or public figure is killed during a terror attack or direct some murder, and they have put a mark that the order has been fulfilled. It's just a database of the criminal Kiev regime that from the point of view of Bankova and the American sponsors who are subject to being physically destroyed, being killed. And there are photos of those victims, and they put marks when they are eliminated, when they are killed. On the 6th of May, the Kiev regime committed an attack against Zakhar Lepin. As a result, his comrade Alexander Shubin was killed, and Zakhar Lepin himself was seriously wounded. They were both in the Peacemaker database. They appeared on the site back in 2014. The list of persons, direct quote, threatening the national security of Ukraine, end of quote, was included in 2018. And all this time his life was under a constant threat. The hunt for dissenters undesirable to the Kiev authorities is conducted purposefully. For example, Semyon Yeroman was killed, a correspondent of the Izvestia, and his data had also been posted on that terrorist website. And the mechanisms aimed at the Peacemaker websites are a vivid testimony of the hypocrisy and destroying some standards, any standards that are applicable to those who call themselves a democracy. And it's just the understanding of the false nature of the Western ideas, what they, with regard to the journalist's right. In an interview to the British media, The Economist, President Macron declared that if Russian troops break through the front line and the Ukrainian side makes a corresponding request, it will be necessary to raise a question of sending Western troops to the region. We have many times commented on the French leader's provocative rhetoric. He has made many similar statements, and Macron himself explains that as a desire to create a certain strategic uncertainty for Russia. But we have to disappoint him. For us, the situation looks more than certain. If the French appear in the conflict zone, they will inevitably become targets for the Russian armed forces. We have already proof of the involvement of Paris. His statements are not only rejected by his EU and NATO allies, but the overwhelming majority of French citizens. They have become themselves victims of this strategic uncertainty. It's actually difficult to understand what he means. So the French citizens now become direct victims in a direct sense of this word. I would repeat the data on the French killed in the conflict zone, and maybe not even took part, but commanded the Ukrainian army forces, made some advice, gave some instructions. There is even more evidence of that. But Macron does not seem to be confused with that. That's what the true democracy should look like, in his opinion. It's about the manipulation by official Paris of some Russian military threat, and the desire to justify the multi-billion-dollar expenses on the Western hybrid war against Russia. And the French just thought that it should be conquered, it should be taken. And the Russian servicemen were on the territory of France only when they were fighting the aggressor, and to force the aggressor back to his own country. And Macron is not original in his statements, unfortunately. It's difficult to understand for the French citizens, for other countries' citizens, that the recklessness of the political elites of France, as they are parting with their own military, political, and even intellectual sovereignty. Yes, there were shameful events in French history, but there were great events as well. Those of French resistance and the stance of its leaders in the second half of the Second World War. These are great pages of history, and we should look upon that and not some shameful events in the French history that also took place and that are also not forgotten by us. But this issue also has a pragmatic side to that. It's just pure pragmatic. When not only European security is destroyed, but the security of France itself is also destroyed. And many, just a lot of comments of the British officials when the British and French ambassadors were summoned. And there is also one statement that should be commented on, accusations against alleged arson on the outskirts of London by our country. It's just some petty crime in accordance to them. Those used to be chemical weapons, but now we're just setting fire to some warehouses. Something has been broken in London, it seems. It's about the information war against our country by Downing Street. Through the media, such events are used by the British officials to attribute their own pathetic, those are pathetic attempts to attribute their own political miscalculations to Russia. Now the Conservative Party, its ratings are decreasing, and more voters realize that the social and economic turmoil in the country is caused by the current authorities. It's even to the detriment of their own national interests, to their own financial welfare. Those accusations are actually unsubstantiated, as they always are. These are allegations of a certain connection with the Russian states. They are not supported by any facts. You remember highly likely and Britain having a certain table where highly likely occupies, I think, the 7th line. They have some their own definition of probability. It's difficult to say which level of probability, possibility is the participation of Russia in the arson of some warehouses, but it's just disinformation. We call upon London to end this anti-Russian hysteria, and Russia does not support diversions, acts of sabotage against civilian objects, and is ready to discuss any concerns in a substantive manner. However, the British side has rejected such proposals within the last decades. So if London has official materials on that account, so they must have invented something. It would be not bad to pass that to the Russian embassy. Moldova, we continue to follow the situation in that country, and the celebrations of the victory in the Second World War and the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Moldova from the Nazi invaders. It's actually horrible. We usually speak about the victims, about people who actually died or were wounded. It's just about moral victims. I do not know what is more horrible, but it's actually horrible. During her election campaign in 2020, Maria Zakharova promised that the voters will be able to celebrate holidays, including the 9th of May. It's just a public holiday that has existed for decades, confirmed from the point of view of moral ideas, historical truth by the Nuremberg Tribunal, the UN General Assembly, that is making statements on that, has made a lot of statements. When Moldova left the Soviet Union, and After that, and even now, it is enshrined as the right of the Moldovan citizens. For that right, many people, so many people were killed that attribute themselves to Moldovans, to Moldova during the Second World War. And back then, during her election campaign, she allowed them that if she would be elected, people also, among other things, would be able to celebrate the 9th of May. And she said, it's a quote, "It's your right and no one can take it away from you," end of quote. I have a feeling that maybe it's just a blatant lie, and it's just impossible to forget your words that were 2 or 3 years ago. In 2023, the Moldovan authorities tried to shift the Victory Day celebrations to the 8th of May, and they tried to rename this holiday. You know how they wanted to call that? The Day of Reconciliation in memory of the fallen during the Second World War.
She can even remember Hitler supporters here. That's what they do. As Moldovan observers noted, the authorities needed it not to impede the celebration of the Europe Day that is also celebrated on May 9th in Moldova. Today, the Moldovan activists are openly saying that the leadership of the country is doing its utmost in order to stand in the way of the May 9th celebrations. And this is happening in Moldova that did a lot for the victory, as well as the citizens of this republic. These people are ethnic Moldovans, and they were living in other regions of the Soviet Union. This region gave so much so that we could ensure the common victory. Nobody divided this victory. And right now, the Western puppet that came to power using Western money, together with the EU mission in Moldova, launched an information campaign calling the citizens of Moldova to come to the streets on May 9th to celebrate the Europe Day. They expect high guests from Brussels, and as a result, the organizers of the Victory Day had to change the routes for the Immortal Regiment. At the same time, they honor the Romanian soldiers that were fighting on the side of Hitler Germany. On April 20th, the Monumentum Association, that is well known for its monuments to Nazi henchmen, opened, just think of it, the mausoleum of Romanian army to honor, and it's difficult for me to say that because it should all go in brackets, to honor over 100 of Romanian heroes that died for the liberation of Chisinau in July 1941. You know what? It should be described not as a crime against historical truth or rewriting of history of its own people. This should be described as a national treason. On April 28th, in the settlement of Mikloșeni, there was the ceremony of remembrance for Romanian soldiers that died on the front lines of 2 world wars. At the same time, the Moldovan surge officers were denied of reburying Soviet warriors. On May 7th, radical nationalists published a video where they humiliated those who lived in Bubec settlement. They called to dismantle the Soviet monument. This monument was erected, and according to the current authorities, rather a regime, it should be destroyed. And you know what? What was the response of Moldovan authorities? Would they condemn the current rhetoric, let alone legal aspects? There was no feedback, no response whatsoever, despite attempts of the Chisinau regime to put to oblivion the feat of their predecessors. The latest social opinion polls state that the majority of citizens will celebrate May 9th. There will be the Immortal Regiment, there will be mass rallies and wreath-laying ceremonies to the memorials of those who contributed to the defeat of fascism. According to organizers, Chisinau will have the biggest banner of victory in the world. And all these attempts of the Nazi revenge in Moldova are doomed to failure. By the way, since we're talking about the West, double standards and lawlessness, a few words on terrorist attacks and investigation, the international law and the absence of it. A few words on terrorist attacks at Nord Stream 1 and 2 and the investigation that should have been going on, but it is not going on. In February, Danish and Swedish authorities decided to end the investigation of the diversions at Nord Stream 1 and 2, and this confirms that those countries are not interested in identifying the perpetrators of terrorist attacks. Of course, this evidence should have been needed by law enforcers, and that is something that our country has been doing, but we are following the rhetorics of Western countries around energy policy of Europe, of our country. What do you need to understand who was behind this attack? Who was capitalizing on suspending the sustainable economic cooperation between Western Europe and the Russian Federation. From the very beginning, Copenhagen and Stockholm refused any interaction with Russia on investigation. They impeded the launch of the international investigation under the United Nations auspices. And that is also telling. Okay, they said this is about Russia and they do not want to have anything in common with Russia, and currently they stopped the investigation. We have nothing to do with that. It was about their own domestic investigation. That means that they do not want to have anything to do with the truth, right? In October 2022, the head of the Russian government, Mishustin, sent a request to Denmark and Sweden, but it was not responded. There were also requests by the Prosecutor General's Office of Russia, but they were denied. They claimed that they suspended national investigation without providing any results of the investigation to the Russian side. Hence the question, has there been any investigation? We get an impression that authorities of Denmark and Sweden know for sure who orchestrated this terrorist attack, and they simply decided to get away from that. Or they are facing such an enormous political pressure that they understand that for them it is the question of life and death. The Russian Foreign Ministry will continue to seek a unpoliticized investigation of diversions using Russian authorities and Gazprom. Despite the artificial impediments, such a terrorist attack is a serious precedent. It is a threat to regional and global energy security. It demands collective response of global community. We take note that given the volume of gas export via Nord Stream 1 and 2, our country is an affected country, and we hope that the parties of interest would review their position. They will abandon unnecessary politicization, and they will opt for cooperation. I would like to once again draw your attention to the constant fight that lawyers and family members of General Ratko Mladic are doing for his life and health. Despite the data that his health conditions are deteriorating, the international mechanism continues to neglect its basic rights, including the right for appropriate medical assistance. We're talking about many years of not providing proper medical records on his health conditions and refusing requests to provide temporary liberation for humanitarian grounds. Although Serbia was ready to accommodate him, this shows that the mechanism seeks to make the most damage to Serbs. The collective West claimed that they are the ones who are responsible in the civil war in the territory of former Yugoslavia. It continues to punish them for their independence. And by the way, the ones who experimented on living humans, black transplantologists who were acting not just in Kosovo, but in the interests of Western hospitals, Western financial entities who benefited from that. The political establishment of the West that wanted to have these human organs, and they were not brought to justice, they were not punished, but they were covered up by all the opportunities of a Western political machine. We once again call the mechanism to liberate Latko Mladic for humanitarian concerns, and we recall that this institution bears full responsibility for his deteriorating health conditions. Well, a few words on the Middle East settlement. That's what I wanted to say. Unfortunately, I cannot say that given what is happening there. It is far from being a settlement. That is why I'm talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The prospects for settling the situation in the Gaza Strip and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in general are nowhere to be seen. The situation is aggravating on a daily basis with dire humanitarian repercussions for the civilians population. This is a humanitarian tragedy, disaster with disastrous statistics. On top of that, it is unparalleled in modern history. Come to think of it, as a result of the Israeli military operation since October 2023, 35,000 Palestinians were killed in Gaza, many of which are women and children. We're talking about civilians first and foremost. And certainly, when we say 35,000 people that were killed, we have no right to forget about dozens of thousands of wounded. These are not simple bruises or psychological trauma. We're talking about severe injuries that lead to disability, depriving persons of any normal life. Civilian infrastructure has been virtually completely damaged. The situation is aggravated due to the lack of humanitarian assistance. As a result, the significant part of Gaza population, according to UN agencies, namely the World Food Programme, is on the brink of famine. And the most blasphemous part is that there has been bullying of Palestinians in the information space, stating that, well, what kind of famine are we talking about since people are sunbathing on the beaches? This is inhumane treatment. An additional destabilizing factor is the launch of the Israeli operation in Rafah in southern Gaza, which is home to 1.5 million Palestinian civilians. We demand that the international humanitarian law be observed. Many rounds of negotiations between Israel and Hamas through mediators on the exchange of Israelis, POWs and Palestinian POWs led to no result. Let me also note that Russia also takes an active effort to liberate those Russians detained in Gaza. The current situation confirms our position that it is necessary to start bringing about conditions to establish a direct dialogue between Palestinians and Israelis on the whole range of issues of the final status. And this process should result in implementing the two-state solution that was endorsed between the international community, namely to establish Israel and Palestine in the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, coexisting in peace and security. That is the focus of our effort in the UNSC, Russian initiative on consolidating approaches of key foreign stakeholders to the Middle East settlement, and our efforts to restore the Palestinian national unity, building upon the PLO platform. We are ready to interact with regional and international stakeholders on this basis. The current aggravation in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict shows the tragic consequences of attempts to monopolize mediation and ungrounded ambitions to address all global issues on its own. And a few words on humanitarian assistance. We are doing our utmost to alleviate the plight of civilians in the Gaza Strip. Starting from October 19th, 2024, the Russian AMICOM sent flights to Egypt to provide 539 tons of humanitarian cargo. This is a large-scale tragedy, and I'm saying that simply not to repeat something that is an ultimate truth. That is a humanitarian disaster. The suffering of civilians in Gaza did not leave us indifferent. Together with state authorities, many Russian NGOs got on board, as well as individuals. At the same time, our country, for a decade, has been having its humanitarian campaigns, and it has doing its utmost so that people could survive in former southeastern Ukraine. Currently, we're talking about our regions, and our country is gathering humanitarian assistance to those in need due to the developments around Ukraine. And we believe that it is not only possible but necessary to provide assistance to the citizens of Gaza. Thanks to the efforts of our citizens and NGOs, public entities, hundreds of tons of medicine, warm clothes, tents, food, and essentials were collected, and this is an ongoing effort. Now, on humanitarian cooperation, on April 19th, Italy inaugurated the Russian pavilion in the Venice Biennale. In line with the arrangements between Moscow and La Paz, this pavilion was provided to the state of Bolivia, and hence in the recently revamped exhibition hall. And let me remind you that it was designed by Russian architect Alexei Shusev in early 20th century. So this pavilion, from April 20th to November 24th, this pavilion will exhibit the works of 25 artists from Bolivia and other countries of Latin America. They have the same common topic, looking to the future. We're moving forward. During the inauguration, officials from Bolivia expressed appreciation to Russia for this friendly step. They highlighted our respect to cultural diversity of other countries and peoples. They praised cooperation with Russia during the preparation of this exhibition. This is another example of fruitful cooperation between Russia and countries of global majority, and it shows sincere commitment of our country to cultural diversity, the respect to indigenous art of Latin America and the Caribbean. We seek to further gradually develop versatile cooperation with Latin American countries and the Caribbean, facilitating their role in international affairs, including in culture, against the backdrop of the emerging multipolarity. Today, May the 8th, marks 80 years of the diplomatic relations between Russia and Costa Rica. Well, this is a tangible date. However, the first contacts were established way before that, back in 1872. Russian Emperor Alexander II and Costa Rica President Tomas Guardia Gutierrez exchanged messages, and this set the beginning for our bilateral ties. This was the step that allowed us to establish the solid ties of friendship and mutual understanding, set the foundation for fruitful trade and economic and cultural humanitarian cooperation, as well as interaction in the international arena. We value the wealth of bilateral relations established between our citizens, and we are ready to further develop them, building upon mutual respect, sovereign equality of states, and other founding principles of international law. We are convinced that only such an approach meets the core interests of Russians and Costa Ricans that traditionally have mutual affinity and their aspiration to having cultural, educational, tourist exchanges that enrich our countries and peoples. From the 14th to 19th of May this year, Kazan will host the 8th Young Diplomats Forum of the OIC. Traditionally, within the 15th International Economic Forum, Russia Islamic World, Kazan Forum 2024. This Young Diplomats Forum is a unique discussion platform for a young staff of foreign ministries, together with well-known public figures, diplomats, officials, experts, and businessmen. This platform was built on the principles of the so-called horizontal diplomacy. The goal of the forum is to advance foreign political interests of Russia. What are the main tasks? That is to develop bilateral and multilateral economic ties between member states, establishing trust-based contacts between young colleagues that will shape the foreign political agenda of their states.
And the introductory statement will be made by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov. The forum is held annually from 2016, and about 250 young diplomats from more than 35 OIC countries took part. The main topic will be diplomacy of the new multipolar world, and discussions will focus on new international security architecture, as well as aspects of work on the ground of young professionals, and there will be also issues related to technological and humanitarian diplomacy. Experts from 23 OIC countries will take part, as the issue of joining the International Association of Young Diplomats and a meeting of the Kazan Diplomatic Club, as well as the participation of students of Kazan Federal University. The forum is organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia and the authorities of the Republic of Tatarstan. One more interesting humanitarian news. From the 25th to the 26th of May, the All-Russian Sabantuy will take place in the city of Sibai. The participants are representatives of federal and regional institutions, investors, experts take part, renowned public figures, and it is organized by the Republic of Bashkortostan with the Agency of Strategic Initiatives. More than 20 sessions are planned on the development of tourist infrastructure in Trans-Urals, as well as public-private partnership, capacity building in personnel, and the Republic of Uzbekistan, its delegation, will participate, and we call upon media representatives to take part in the coverage of this event. We will post the relevant link in the text version of the briefing. What I have mentioned at the beginning, the topic of this recently, it has been the great victory, of course, But there is one more date marked today on the 8th of May in the context of these problems. 75 years ago, on the 8th of May 1949, in Treptower Park in Berlin, the Warrior Liberator Monument was erected. It was in memory of, just think about it, 22,000 Soviet soldiers who died in the capture of the capital of Nazi Germany. And in the war grave, about 7,000 Soviet soldiers have been buried. The work on the monuments was started in 1946. It was being erected during 3 years. The architect is Yakov Belopolsky, and the sculptor is Evgeny Vuchetich. The monument weighs about 70 tons. It was cast in Leningrad, and it was shipped to Berlin in parts. German sculptors, stonemasons, and workers also took part in the construction. The memorial was inaugurated on the 8th of May 1949 in the Treptower Park, very much beloved by the citizens. And that year, the Soviet military command handed over the maintenance and care of the burial site to the Berlin magistrate. The warrior has a sword in his hand that cut the Nazi swastika. On the other hand, he holds a rescued German girl, and the prototype of the soldier was the standard bearer of the 220th Guards Rifle Regiment, Sergeant Nikolai Masalov. Risking his life, he took a 3-year-old German girl out of the crossfire during the street battles in Berlin on the 30th of April 1945. Before the monument is a field with mass graves and sculptures of kneeling soldiers. There are inscriptions in 2 languages: eternal glory to the soldiers of the Soviet army who gave their lives in the struggle for the liberation of mankind. It's not just a place of mournful remembrance, but a symbol of the heroism of the Red Army. Soldiers who gave their lives to defeat the Nazi regime. I would remind that they gave their lives for the people, the future generations for whom they sacrificed that. Regardless of civilians, of their country, of their gender, of their race, nationality. They just fought for the future, for the civilization, against the evil, for the good, for the light, against the darkness. The memorial is also a warning to the present generations and the future generations that the mankind must firmly learn the most terrible lesson of the 20th century and not allow the tragedy to be repeated. It's especially relevant now when Europe has declared war on historical truth. Purposefully demolishing and destroying the monuments to the Soviet soldiers and their soldiers as well, by trying to desecrate the mass graves. Unfortunately, the Warrior Liberator Memorial has also become a victim of Russophobia. Just think, in April 2022, the monument was twice desecrated by vandals who smeared it with red paint and covered it with anti-Russian inscriptions. In their fairy tales, in their historical records, regardless of time, place, geography, there is often a phrase appearing. If some monument, temple, or some burial site is destroyed, trouble is to come, will come, wars will begin, your houses will be destroyed, and so on. It's about today, it's about the European continent. Just no one understood. No one could think that it would be the indicator, those monuments. There will be that test, the signal that the world is facing another horrible event, and it has been prepared by itself. When they started to destroy those monuments, our country said that trouble is to come. They're not just protected by multilateral and bilateral agreements and international rights. It's contrary to different resolutions, proclamations, declarations adopted within different international bodies. It's not just our predecessors there. The monuments were erected in order to preserve the historical memory and avoid the mistakes that could lead to their repetition. Someone has heard and someone has not. But in one way or another, take care of the monuments. And there is a special map by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs together with the Historical Society where all the monuments that exist now and have been and have not been preserved. I'm talking not only about the monuments but about the graves, the memorial, the thematic sculptures and the inscriptions. It could be a desire of the Western states to conceal the memory of the Second World War, as noted by our president, and they are just the same soldiers, the Red Army soldiers who died during the liberation of Europe from Nazism, and now these monuments are being demolished. It's about the mistakes that should not be repeated by the humankind, and of those events, those memorials, monuments have to remind. And one more quote that is a testimony of the heroic feats of our predecessors, of their heroic deeds. And it's about warning, it's about not allowing just horrible events that were experienced by the humankind in the past. And one more example of the culture of cancellation by the Western capitals. In Germany, they prohibited to use Soviet symbols to demonstrate flags, symbols in Treptower Park, in Pankow, Tiergarten, and on the adjacent territories. And they also prohibited songs sung by the Red Army soldiers when they liberated Berlin from brown plague. These are the lessons. Just learn. Well, it's about a democracy when everything is allowed, and after that many things are not allowed, actually. It's not about the law is like that. It's about such a game, very horrible and dangerous. The military songs of those years very well known to all of us that cause tears in the eyes of veterans and the victims of concentration camps. When the Turetsky choir visited Berlin and other countries, for example Israel, the CIS countries, veterans and concentration camps victims, primarily those who were children in concentration camps, and they just have those marks with numbers, you understand what that is. They lived through all those horrors, and in 80 years they saw that reminder on their hand about the stolen childhood. The Turetsky choir has sung a lot and sings different songs. What did they ask for? What do you think? Those who have lived through the horrors of Nazism, they asked the victory songs, the military songs, and now they are denied. It is them who are denied in Germany to sing and to hear and to turn on those songs. Even more humiliatory is the ban to wear. It's just impossible to talk about all that. It's just shameful. It's one of the most shameful pages in the history of Germany for its entire history. They think that the Third Reich is a shameful page, but it's even more shameful, I would say. Because back then, many people are influenced by Goebbels' propaganda. And they were convinced that it was allegedly the true position, the truth of history. But back then it was just impossible to distinguish where was the truth, where was the lie, where was the evil and the good. Now the choice of Germany is even more criminal than the choice made 80 years ago. You just cannot imagine about the Georgian ribbon, what they have invented. It is allowed in Germany to use the colors of the Georgian ribbon and the Russian flag in wreaths and flowers for laying at the memorials. You just need to be animals to think about that. It's just interesting for me. The symbol of the Holocaust is the yellow Star of David. Is everything okay in Germany with that? Or there are also experiments? Have they not invented that a David's star could offend from the point of view of the sick liberal democratic conscience? The feeling of the Nazi supporters, who are multiple on the territory of Germany now, has something like that not appeared? It's only with regard to the symbols of liberators. So where are those anti-Nazi organizations in Europe? The organizations who think that the Holocaust memory preservation is their task. Because where are they? Why are they not active? Because it was their symbols. With those symbols, they took the Holocaust victims, they saved them, and now they just shamefully keep silent. In sharing the common victory and just concealing other things as useless. What is now happening in Germany with the support of the German authorities is primarily humiliating the German people. It's humiliating the memory of those who have asked to preserve the memory of those times, we condemn such a sacrilegious decision of the Berlin authorities and call for its cancellation as unlawful, anti-humane, anti-scientific, anti-historical and criminal. We call for a halt to rewriting of history. It cannot be rewritten. It has already happened in your German history. They have tried to rewrite the entire nation, and the price was very high. Now about the Victory Day, we will commemorate as it should be commemorated. It's a happy holiday in celebrating the great victory. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs participates in various events in celebration of the Victory Day. Despite attempts of some countries to create obstacles or to ban the celebration, our diplomats organize events in various countries around the world. Those were in 2024 27,000 sites across Russia and 200 sites abroad. The Garden of Memory, annual planting of trees, and the event was attended by representatives from 35 countries.
Throughout the 5 years, the memory gardens were planted in over 50 countries. The international campaign, the Memory Flame, will be attended by 14 countries. Part of the inextinguishable flame will be moved to the countries of Europe, Asia, Africa, including Belarus, Algeria, Cyprus, Azerbaijan, Serbia, Germany. I would clarify the list of countries in not to deceive you. I said that America is also involved, but I will clarify that. That is a reminder of the importance of joint effort to preserve the historical truth. Athletes and artists and volunteers will take the flame from the Alexander Garden. Volunteers abroad will provide such St. George ribbons to 35 countries. These ribbons will be given out at 7,000 sites, including within the polar circle. I often hear, isn't that too much? Not at all. It would be too much should there be no counteraction. And that is what is happening, the rewriting of textbooks, preparation of atrocious movies that were presented as documentaries, and deleting any information whatsoever on the role of Soviet Union, of the Soviet people, on the key role in the history, and deleting its role in the history of World War II. That's not too much. Those who can will make a choice what format he should choose. Those who wish could invite family members and friends to attend. There are a great number of campaigns that could be chosen given the current situation. Certainly, what we wanted to have is, well, maybe more feedback, maybe more initiative, so that it could be made sincerely. We understand that for decades they've been working on the memory of people. People were indoctrinated for many years at a legislative level. Some countries even made it not possible to use the victory insignia or even to carry out some events, moving as far as banning songs or even mentioning these events in the genuine historical context. That means that we're not doing too much. within the Victory Windows campaign, in many countries of the world, windows and fronts of buildings are decorated. Russian diplomats, our compatriots in Albania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Egypt, India, Israel, Uruguay, and Japan participated in these patriotic campaigns. Were it not for these campaigns, everybody would forget about that. If we didn't fight for every memorial, if we didn't reach out to citizens, volunteers, and diplomats, NGOs, should they not focus on this? Were it not for the volunteers' activities to preserve the monuments, even during World War II, people were concealed, were hidden from fascists, but currently memorials have been hidden. They try to find a different place for them. Sometimes they pay and they buy the territory in order to organize a new memorial. Should this hadn't happened, then nobody would remember that. Many of our compatriots will take to the streets tomorrow during the Victory Day to honor the heroes of the Great Patriotic War during the Immortal Regiment traditional march. With the wartime songs, the participants brought to the streets the photos of victorious heroes. In many countries of the globe, they defeated Hitler Germany and liberated the world from fascism. This year, in many countries of the world, the Immortal Regiment will be online. This will allow us to make a contribution to preserving historical legacy. Despite the counteraction by unfriendly states, Russian diplomats and compatriots are paying tribute to the fallen fighters and honor veterans that liberated the world from Nazism. On May the 8th and 9th, in many parts of the globe, in Abkhazia, Azerbaijan, South Ossetia, and many other states, there will be ceremonies of wreath laying to the tombs of the unknown soldiers, to the memorials of fallen Soviet soldiers, prisoners of wars, and to civilians. There will be festivities and concerts. The staff of territorial bodies, foreign ministries, missions in Russian regions will also attend festivities. On May 9th, Foreign Minister's staff will lay wreath to the memorials of Eternal Flame and tombs of the unknown soldiers. With the help of our offices in regional state institutions, there will be lectures carried out on confronting glorification of Nazism. There will be an international campaign reading to kids on the Great Patriotic War, the contest of children drawings, and the Patriotic Memorial Campaign, the Memory Wall. The Foreign Ministry's office in St. Petersburg organizes the March of Consular Corps of friendly states. The employees of Russian ministry in Samara attended the International Anti-Fascist Forum, Guitars on Duty, that brought together public activists and musicians from 11 countries. Representatives of